Hello and welcome to the SustainabiliTREE podcast with me, Katie.
And me, Mike. In SustainabiliTREE, we will explore all things trees and woodlands with a specific focus on the issue of plastics within the forestry sector.
In each episode, we will be looking at a variety of topics around this theme, including woodland creation, funding streams, plastic pollution, deer, soils, ecology, and so much more.
Shall we get started, Katie?
Let's go!
Well, welcome back, Katie. How are we doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Mike. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Although I say not too bad every single time we do this podcast. But yeah, the sun is shining, and you can't ask for much more, can you?
We can't help but talk about the weather. We say this, don't we? We're like, right, we won't mention the weather, but we're Brits. We can't help it. It's sunny here too.
Well, you can't not mention the sunshine, can you? After there's been 10 days of just complete grey and mist, and yeah, it's made the woodlands I've visited look really good and quite scary.
Oh, why scary?
Well, I guess that kind of misty woodland, quite dank, dark.
Oh, okay, Halloween vibes.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I do love this time of year though. Crunchy leaves, all the seeds on the floor, the colours. It's beautiful.
Yeah, you can't ask for much more, can you? Apart from a little bit more warmth, I guess.
Yeah, but then that adds to it being nice and chilly. Oh, Christmassy vibes. It's nearly Christmas, Mike. Right, I won't talk about that too much. But
no, it's only the 11th of November when we're filming, recording this, so you can't, at least a 4-week hiatus on that chat, I think.
All right, next episode I'll go through Christmas, and there'll have to be a Christmas hat that I pull the next episode out of that time. For sure. How is things going with prepping for planting season?
Oh, it's good. It's good. We're going to be busy this winter, which is what you want to be. We were looking at a site only a couple of weeks ago, and the landowner reckons it -10 is their average temperature. So that's going to be interesting, trying to get trees in the ground on that site. I might have to take a drill, but no, we're going to be.
It's cold.
So we're going to be busy, and we're going to need some really kind of good and stout and brave volunteers, I think. How about yourself?
Yeah, well, I don't do any planting anymore, sadly. I'm on the other end of it, on the advisory side. But yeah, definitely next year I'd like to go out probably with some volunteer groups and get my boots on again and get digging. But yeah, lots of schemes that I know of happening in the area. Lots of trees going in, which is good. But this what leads on nicely to what we're going to be talking about this week, isn't it? Is the other thing other than deer, which is my nemesis down here in the south for getting trees established. We're also going to be talking about all the lovely small furry creatures that can also impact our planting.
Oh, good.
And I will say that I'm a big softie. I love a vole. I love a hare. They're gorgeous, but being practical, we're going to talk about their impacts on trees. And I'll try not to go all squeaky when I look at the pictures of them on my screen.
So when you're talking about kind of small mammals, we're going to be looking at kind of voles, rabbits, hares, mice, squirrels. I guess because they have the most impact on what we do.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, they're the ones. And yeah, they impact the trees in different ways. And again, same with what we spoke about with deer. We've got slightly different ways that we can protect our trees as well. So should we get into it?
Yeah, let's do it.
So let's start with our friends, the squirrels, I think they'll be a good ones to start with. So, as we know, they live in trees, and they have slightly different impacts on trees than the other species that we've mentioned, because they particularly like older trees. So not so much of an issue, I'd say, with the establishment side of things, but they like trees sort of between the ages of 10 and 40 years. They're the ones that are sort of most at risk from squirrels. So they like things like sycamore, hornbeam, willow, beech, pine, larch, them sort of species. But obviously it still has an impact really on our planting, because we'll be planting them species. So if you've got a lot of squirrels in the environment, then you know that they're going to be impacting them as your trees grow older. So how much do you know about the grey squirrel, Mike?
I like them. I think everybody likes a squirrel,
They're very cute.
don't they? Yeah, and I've got to admit, it probably wasn't when I first got into woodland planting. I think you say get into woodland planting. I guess so, yeah. When I first kind of started
Your
on,
hobby.
yeah, exactly. When I started on this this career, I think that I knew about deer and rabbits and voles and things like that, but I hadn't really considered squirrels. So yeah, please do fire away and tell me what you know about. We're looking at grey squirrels, aren't we?
Yes, grey squirrels. We'll mention the reds because they are
Yay!
exceptionally beautiful. Yeah, grey squirrels, they were introduced around 100 years ago. So they're not native to this country, but our beloved red squirrels are. Red squirrels are a lot smaller than grey squirrels, and they've got the little tufty ears and the big bushy tails, and they're absolutely gorgeous. But sadly, the grey squirrels have actually caused our native red squirrel to decline, and that is through just general competition, because obviously they're after the same food sources, they live in the same habitat, but also they grey squirrels can give them a disease called squirrel pox, which sadly reds are more susceptible to, and they don't deal with it as well as the grey squirrels can. I think grey squirrels, are they immune to it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, but the reds aren't. So yeah, which is such a shame. But they have done very well across the country, and in certain parts of the country, and again down here where I am, grey squirrels are everywhere. So they obviously, with the smaller areas of woodlands that we have now, and well, across all trees really, they are causing some damage. But really cool project that's actually happening in my area. So around where I live, we've got an island called Mersey Island, where they did a reintroduction project for red squirrels. So on that island, you've got reds, which is really lovely because, to be able to see them, we'd have to go quite far up north. Or do they have them in Cornwall way? Or is it Wales?
Yeah, it's Wales, obviously up to Formby, near Southport, which is obviously not far from where I live, and then
Oh,
you're
lovely.
then heading up into the Dales and Lake District, and obviously Scotland as well.
Yeah, Scotland. Yeah. So down here, yes, we've just got that pocket of them on that island. But yeah, but sadly everywhere else it's greys. And yeah, so they cause a variety of different problems to trees. So the way that they gnaw on them, so they can like ring bark younger trees, which obviously can cause them to die. But even if these trees don't die, it can degrade the timber. And again, especially where I am, cricket bat willows is quite a prominent thing along sort of like riparian areas down here. And they're obviously quite valuable timber. And if you get squirrels sort of going at it on them, it can cause quite a problem. But also because they do like cause lesions and things like that on these trees through their browsing, and they're nibbling away, then fungal diseases can get into them as well, so that can kill them or make them poorly in another way. So yeah, really, even if they don't directly kill them off, they sort of can kill them off later down the line or cause them to not be as viable trees. So yeah, that's why people don't like having grey squirrels in their woodlands or their plantations. And sadly, I mean, if there was a smaller population of them, again similar to deer, it wouldn't be as much of an issue. But there's just so many of them now that it's a problem. What's it
So
like in the Dales for you?
it's the same. It's the same, really.
Yeah.
I mean, when you say ring barking, just for the kind of the unaware, that is where they will basically nibble the bark all the way around a branch, all the way around the trunk. And then does that mean that kind of disease can get into that particular? It obviously weakens the tree and can cause disease and the death of the tree. Is that
Yes.
yeah?
Yeah. So they're just sort of opening opening it up, basically, like us. If you get a cut, and then things can get in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think in the Dales, what I've been finding, I mean, there's two ways of looking at this, isn't there? You know, we've got to plant thousands and thousands of trees to meet our climate targets, but I think equally as important, that is very, very important, but equally important is that we look after our woodlands that we've got, make them as resilient as possible. And I think that sometimes does get kind of forgotten, doesn't it, Katie, in the kind of debate around kind of planting trees and, we've got targets to hit, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. That's the sexy stuff, isn't it? We need 30,000 hectares, over the next how many years to hit our targets. But, the simple fact is our existing woodlands, especially our ancient woodlands, are not being managed to make them resilient in the future. And that's something I'm seeing in the Dales now, particularly with some of the work that we're doing in small woodlands, going to a small woodland. And it's very easy to see that, needs a bit of thinning here. There's no understory. You've got a little bit of deer damage here and there. But I'm starting to see, especially on some of the more mature trees, quite a significant squirrel impact. But I don't know if it's the same for you, Katie, but I'm only seeing it on kind of almost little pockets of trees within a woodland. So it's not like an extensive damage to 20, 30, 50 oaks. They almost seem to be centered on kind of 2 or 3 trees, and then they probably do move on. Is that what you're seeing kind of where you are?
Yeah, it varies really. I see it a lot. So obviously, because they go up higher up in the canopy and things, you see it more on the younger trees, the lower down damage. But it just depends on the woodland. Some woodlands there's like a significant amount. Some woodlands there's just a little bit. But like I say, the ones that are sort of most impactful are if you've got sort of like plantation woodlands, where I guess cricketback willow plantations are more spaced out anyway, so there's less trees per hectare, so you'd notice it more if there's quite a lot of squirrels there. But yeah, I would say that the level of damage is quite consistent across, Essex and Suffolk.
Yeah. And that's just down to kind of sheer numbers and sheer pressure. I wonder if I'm lucky at the moment because the woodlands I'm visiting are, have been established. They have got that kind of getting to be 40, 50 years old. So the squirrels have just come in and are starting to cause that little bit of damage. Perhaps I'm being lucky, Katie, with the kind of the damage I'm seeing at the moment.
Yeah, it's just, again, it's like our interesting chat with Ben, wasn't it, about how the populations differ with different species of deer across the UK. Obviously, it's going to be similar with squirrels. You're going to have boom populations in different areas where they, and people feed them a lot. They do particularly well in urban areas, don't they? Because they love a bird feeder in the garden and things. So they're getting lots of supplementary planting, I've got planting on the brain. Supplementary feeding, elsewhere as well. So I guess, if you've got like a woodland but loads of gardens around it, maybe won't have so much damage on the trees because they'll be eating the food and living in people's gardens. But yeah, I think it differs around when the young are out as well. So obviously around the spring and summertime when everything's all lush and stuff, they do the most damage. And then when the young's there, obviously can cause more. So, but yeah, it's like you say, it's quite significant across the UK, I'd say. But I think there's a lot more focus on them would you say in areas where there is red squirrels, because they're obviously trying to protect the reds a lot more, so there's a lot more management that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm involved in managing a woodland in the Dales that's got a very specific. It's well known in the Dales for having a number of red squirrel there, and there is a grey squirrel watch that takes place. There's national park volunteers that go there all the time. There is a significant project happening next to that site, and they are planting species to provide a buffer area to where the red squirrels are as well, so they know if they get graze into a particular part of that woodland, it's very unlikely that they will travel to the next part of the woodland where the red squirrels are, because there's a significant significant buffer. So whether that's kind of sacrificial trees or anything like that, so it's probably along those lines. I guess, Katie, there's are we looking at kind of what we have to do with deer at the moment in terms of control? I guess that with deer you can put fences up and you can try various different techniques, and obviously tricho we can try with deer, kind of rendered sheep fat kind of emulsion that's sprayed on trees. I guess that's probably difficult with grey squirrels. Is it a case of just trapping? I know there has been there is a program of potential contraception, isn't there, for grey squirrels at the moment?
Yeah.
But that could be a good kind of 3 or 4 years off before that is able to be used widely. And then, have we got time to wait 3 or 4 years for the greys to kind of multiply in numbers, put even more pressure on the reds?
Yeah. Yeah, I think again it's harder because they're sort of targeting the older trees. Like young trees are easier to protect because they're smaller and you can get into the areas. Whereas if it's an existing, mature tree or, things that are getting away, it's harder to protect them. And I mean, lethal control is what is mainly used. So trapping and euthanizing them. Because we don't have any predators. I mean, would be quite a significant prey source for quite a lot of predators, especially on like mainland Europe. And what was it we were talking about the other day, weren't we? Pine martens.
Yes, yeah.
Reintroductions. Yeah, so that was something that gets thrown around a lot as they're a natural predator for squirrels. But there was wasn't it something to do with the grey squirrels are heavier, so they can't sort of get away from them as much, so the pine martens would target them, whereas the red squirrels are lighter, so they can get to the end of branches and sort of escape the pine martens. So isn't that the theory behind it? I can't remember.
Well, yeah, I guess it's a theory, but what happens if you get a red squirrel that's had a little bit too much to eat? And
Well, this is it.
especially you mentioned Christmas. We all overindulge at Christmas, don't we? And sorry, I'm making light of it there, but yeah, that is a concern. Pine marten is a really, really important part of British woodlands, isn't it? But if that then results in a further decline in red squirrels, then we've cut the job up a bit, haven't we? But it's like you were saying before, we're just all out of balance, aren't we? All our kind of systems are out of balance, so we've got to kind of step in and get on top of the greys and make sure they don't do any damage. In terms of kind of future woodland planning, Casey, I know we've got a long podcast today, but I wanted to ask you, you said that before that you're kind of looking at woodland schemes and you're designing and planning schemes. How can you plan for, 30, 40 years ahead with grey squirrel in mind?
Oh, that's hard. Yeah, because species choice, but then again, it depends where you are in the country for what species would work, climate change, all that sort of stuff. I mean, probably would have to include squirrel management into the long-term management of the woodland, if that makes sense. So ideally you would, when putting your project together, have like a planting design like we spoke about before, put in species that work well together near each other, things that can help nurse each other, and thinking about your long-term management of actually going in there and managing it. If you've got, you have areas for coppice, even thinking about your first thinning, you need to think about how you're going to access it, where your rides are going to be, how you're going to, extract timber in the future, all them things you've got to think about. So then when it comes to thinking about what impacts you're going to have in the future, which squirrels will likely be one, and obviously disease as well, it's really difficult. But I think, yeah, just having a management practice in place, whatever that may look like, whether you do trial any new forms of control, like such as the contraceptive project, or you go down the route of lethal control, which is the most common. And it's like you say, if you capture a grey squirrel, because they are a non-native species, then they have to be euthanized usually. So you can't really release them again, which is, yeah, it's a difficult conversation, isn't it? Because it's like we said with the deer, talking about lethal management is hard, but at the same time we also do need to look after the trees and help them to succeed. And we're talking about long-term resilience of woodlands. If our woodlands are getting significant amounts of squirrel damage, I mean, trees are resilient, you know, they can deal with certain amount of damage, which is why we always talk about balance. But when things are off balance and you have a large populations of squirrels causing the same, you know, and then obviously if we've got large populations, they're competing for resources themselves, so you're probably likely going to get more tree damage. It's hard. Yeah,
I guess it's as you say, it's kind of managing your woodland to make sure it's resilient. I get the feeling that you can't affect. I don't know if what you're saying is that you can't effectively design a woodland that is resistant to graze. Would that be right? Obviously, if you I'm trying to put that in a better way, Katie, but you know, if you design a woodland that's going to be resilient to deer damage, there are less palatable species for deer, aren't there? But if you then design a woodland that's kind of less palatable to graze, you're probably going to affect the reds and other things as well. So yeah, there's no easy solution, is there?
no, exactly. And if they're under pressure in the area anyway, even if it is a less palatable species, they'll probably still go for it. Like I say, we're not squirrel experts, so I don't know all the answers. But yeah, it causes problems. I mean, they're, you know, from them stripping the bark and the trees, you know, it prevents the flow of water and, you know, and food and things around the tree. You know, the tree actually being able to do its internal functions. You know, it stresses the tree, and we don't, you know, we've already got enough stress on trees through climate change anyway, and you know, other pressures and all these diseases, like, you know, we mentioned a lot, the, you know, lots more diseases sort of coming across now. The trees are having to deal with a lot, and yeah, the way that squirrels particularly target trees is, you know, the way that they actually damage them is a pathway then for climate change and for diseases to impact them more. So it's really hard, because you could have a tree that's quite healthy and say a disease comes along, it would be able to deal with it, but because you've got squirrels there, they can't deal with it as well. So squirrels are quite significant, I'd say, in the long term sort of survival of existing woodlands. But like you were saying, planning for new woodlands, it needs to be thought of right at the beginning. So all the planting schemes that we're doing, we need to think about how squirrels are going to impact them going forward.
And is that happening, Katie, do you think, across the sector?
Not really. In my personal opinion, I don't think that, well, we're human beings at the end of the day. We don't really tend to think long term. You know, we sort of think in our time frames, where obviously a tree's time frame is hundreds and hundreds of years. So we're quite short-term thinkers. So no, I wouldn't say that it's in a lot of people's plans. But yeah, it's not really something that you know, people tend to think about, but it should be. And that's why hopefully by doing things like this and talking about it, you know, people out there thinking about doing a planting scheme might, you know, put that in their plans going forward and have that in sort of the overall plan. But I don't think it's being done as much. But it's the same with climate change. You know, obviously there's a huge focus on tree species and how things are changing, but we're not really looking at it. If we sort of think it might be a future problem where it is happening now, it's tough.
It is, and it's. I guess you could ask 6 people, 7 people, because we want a balance, I guess. We want a bit of a democracy there. But you could ask them what to do with squirrels in the future, and you might get 7 different answers. And I'm finding that I know we're digressing massively, and this is a podcast in itself, but it's the same with climate change and species selection. I can speak to 3 or 4 kind of woodland practitioners who say you need to be sourcing your trees from further south because it's warmer there, and then in 50 years time your climate will match that. And then I can speak to 3 or 4 and say no, it's local provenance, because that's important, because those species are going to be kind of match the local soils and the local environment. And then you get, I speak to the same people who say, well, we don't know what's going to happen. Trees are resilient, so let's just continue on. And as long as you, plant as many species as possible, that's the best way of keeping a woodland resilient. But we can go into that. We can go into that some other time, I guess, Katie. But yeah, I think what you're saying is there are people, people need to have a plan. The grey squirrel problem isn't going to go away. We have to protect our wonderful reds as well. That's really important. So just have a plan.
Yeah, think about it, put it in there. I'd be really interested to know any listeners how you get on with this, if you've got woodlands yourself, or even if you just see them in your garden. Have you noticed them causing damage? What do you do about it? What's your thoughts on it? What solutions can you think of? Because I think that's the only reason we can move forward, is if we just keep trying different ideas and keep trying to improve the situation. But I'd really like to hear from people, actually, to see what they do, and with the deer as well.
Okay, it would be really good if people did get in contact with us, and I know we're speaking off air. Look at us, media professionals, quite recently about doing a little bit of a kind of a Q&A type podcast. So those kind of real world examples would be really useful. I guess we can't look at absolutely everything in this podcast that can affect kind of tree growth, and we've just spent the best part of half an hour talking about grey squirrels, and I do like grey squirrels as well. It's a bit of a shame we've just picked on the little blighters, haven't we, for half an hour? But moving on to other things that we can pick on and shout at. In where I work, we have a real big issue with voles, and again, I like a vole as well. Quite a lot of the work I do when I go out to site, in fact, probably one of the first things I do when I actually walk onto a site with a landowner is ask them about what kind of browsing happens on there, whether they've seen deer or rabbits or anything like that, but kind of just have a little look around to see if there's any vole damage. And I know that's practically not the first thing you're supposed to do when you're planning a woodland, but it just seems to be the first thing I do when I walk out onto a site is, have I just seen a vole disappear? Because I know that's going to cause some issues. So voles are an issue. What can we do about them?
Yes, I agree with you. They are adorable. And yeah, for those of you who don't know, we have 3 native vole species in the UK. We've got our lovely bank vole, the field vole, and the water vole. So for field voles, I've got a lovely figure in front of me. There's an estimated 75 million field voles in the UK, which is lovely, because they are obviously lovely in their own right, but they're a great food source for our raptors and other things as well. So it's all part of the circle of life. So it's good that to have healthy populations of these species, because if you've got healthy populations of them, then you've got healthy predators and so on. But for our trees, they can cause a problem. Obviously, we like to plant trees in obviously middle of fields or arable fields, or all them sorts of places, which is habitat for these creatures. And then especially if we add in a lovely mulch mat, which becomes a lovely vole hotel, we are basically providing bed and breakfast for them, because they can have a nice little bit of shelter under there from predators, and then they can go out foraging, but they've got a nice young sapling there to nibble at. So they can cause a problem. And I know, like you said, they're a bit of a a bane for you up there with your, and it's the same down here. I actually find that so using mulch mats encourages them. Using loose mulch has been not too bad, and obviously you avoid any plastics or having to remove the mulch mats and stuff by using loose mulch. But obviously it's hard for us to like because obviously I'm so dry in this part of the country, whereas it's a bit wetter where you are, so you might not be using as many mulch mats and things, but they also will find shelter in um, shelter in shelters, in guards and things as well. But I guess, even if you do a fenced scheme with no guards or anything, but you've got lovely long luscious grass, you're going to get them rolling around, aren't you?
Yeah, I don't think there is no ideal solution. As you say, we plant trees in the middle of the field. We provide a perfect salad bar for all nature's little creatures. I think again, we've tried mulch mats, and firstly, they've got to be put in properly as well. We tried the almost Hessian sacks that need 5 bamboo pegs, and yeah, I can't say they've worked massively. I still think the weeds come through quite quick, or the grass comes through quite quick. Mound planting is another thing that I've been involved in. But it was actually one site I was involved in. There's a multitude of mounds kind of in rows, because it was a kind of a mixed woodland, and I kind of just opened up this mound, just getting ready to pop my tree in, and there was a vole nest in there. So like mounds are perfect, aren't they? Aren't they, for voles as well? So there is several different things. I think that, as far as I know, Katie, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, but voles don't particularly like travelling long distances over bare ground where they can be picked off by raptors.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably quite obvious, isn't it? So, I guess you could look at scarifying around where you're going to plant a tree, kind of exposing an area for a vole to make a dash for it would be ideal. But the reason why we've got problem with voles in the dales is there's not enough trees for raptors to sit on, really. So it's not an ideal situation. And some of the woodlands we've been involved in, we do put raptor perches up as well. But the simple fact is that is where some kind of tree guard or vole guard seems to work for us. And again, we can go into the kind of whys and wherefores of that. We have tried very, very small spiral guards, kind of allegedly biodegradable ones, and various different types of recyclable plastic and things like that, and that does seem to kind of keep voles out of that particular area of planting. But then, if you're only using a 2 or 3 inch vole guard, you're then exposing the rest of the tree to hares and rabbits, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So again, it's not ideal. But once again, Katie, that balance is completely out, isn't it? We're putting trees in an area that's not got trees, which means there's not enough perches for raptors. You're putting it in a prime habitat for small mammals. So what do we expect?
Yeah, can you blame them? I mean, if someone put a load of cake in a field, I'd go and eat it. Like, I can't, you can't, like you say, you're putting it in their habitat. But yeah, raptor perches is an interesting one. That's something that recommend down here. Obviously, we've got a lot more tree cover than you do, but it's even with if you've got a large field that you're planting in. Fence posts are great. If you're fencing the site, they act as raptor perches as well. But you could put them within your planting just to encourage, a kezzy to come along and have a little hunt there. But I think what we'll do as well is in the show notes, we'll put a link to what we've spoke about. So mounding, scarifying, roll guards, what they look like, we'll put a link to them sort of things. So for people who are not haven't had first-hand experience of what them things are, you can have a look and see what we mean by that. Roll guards are an interesting one because, like you say, they're great well, say great, they're okay for protecting against voles, but like you say, other predators come along. Well, not predators, browsers. Oh God, I've got predators on the brain now. Um, other browsers come along, sorry, and then just nip the tops off. So and again, it's another bit of plastic, which is what we always come back to. The sustainability side of it, the use of plastic in woodlands. It's just another source. But like you say, we've got these tree targets to meet. We've got to plant in all these areas because they're the only areas that are either available or that are being willed to give up to tree planting. So kind of got to roll with what we've got. But yeah, it does feel me. It reminds me of did you ever watch Animals of Farthing Wood?
Yes, yeah.
Traumatized me as a child, absolutely traumatized me. But that's what I always think of. You think, oh, we're moving into their habitat, and they're there, and it is difficult. But yeah, I'll try not to think about the poor voles too much. But yeah, obviously that's not something that people can really control, as in the same as squirrels and deer, with like management, lethal control. Obviously some people do, but it is more of I'd say that's a species that's more of a protection, isn't it? People
Yes.
put protection up against.
Yeah, I think I'm sure my mound story is a one-off as well, but I'd be I'm quite wary about disturbing the soil that much, Katie. I know that if you plant a tree in a mound, the roots have got to work harder, obviously, to get down to a water source as well. So that almost encourages a little bit more growth. But I'm just concerned about that amount of soil disturbance and ground disturbance. We're trying to create something that's as natural as possible. I mean, if you're going tree planting, it's very difficult to create something that's natural to a natural woodland. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that.
It depends on what you're planting. So where I am, it's a lot of arable fields that get planted. So obviously that's soil that's been disturbed for probably sometimes hundreds of years, ploughed to the inch of its life. So we tend to put a cover plant on there, something nice and low growing like clover or something, to create a nice sward to retain moisture. Obviously we're clay as well here, so if you leave it bare in the summer months, it will just crack and the trees will die. So it creates nice water retention, stops the soil from cracking, and then, but again, that will encourage small mammals such as voles to come and move in. But it's the right thing for that particular site. Whereas having soil disturbance, it just depends on what that site's needs are. It's all very site specific. And obviously sometimes disturbing the soil, like for instance, in an existing ancient woodland, disturbing the soil is, usually a no-go, because obviously releasing carbon and all the lovely stuff that's going on down there. That's why people tend to not use too much machinery or to not do it into wet weather, so they're not like ripping it all apart. So, but when it comes to planting, a lot of the time you need to be able to sort of kickstart the process of the trees going, or protecting them against whatever it is. Like, so in my instance, it's the heat, the dry summers and things, got to protect them against that. So we need to put. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question, or have I
It
gone off
does.
on a tangent?
No, it does. It does. I guess that there's no perfect way, is there? If we were planting kind of, proper, I'm going to call it commercial woodlands. I know you shouldn't call it commercial woodlands, but if you're planting that for productivity, then you you do your best to get your trees off and away as quick as they can, and that probably involve all various kinds of different concoctions as well that can be put into the soil, and weed suppression and things like that. So yeah, it is.
Oh yeah, all the additives and things.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, it's hot. Yeah.
It is very,
I
very
like.
site specific. All I would ask, because we'll move on next, Katie, but all I would ask is that when I go onto a site and I say to I've got to be careful here because the landowner might be listening, but if I go onto a site and I say to the landowner, have you ever seen a vole, rabbit, or deer on this site? That they're honest with me, Katie, and not when I
Mm.
then walk on 2 days later with 25 volunteers with a bag of trees, and I take one step onto the land and watch at least 25 voles disappear off into various holes. I'll leave it. I'll
Oh,
leave it. I'll leave it at that one. Anyway, we
and you rhymed.
we so we
Holes in
obviously
their
have
holes.
voles in the holes. We have an issue with voles where I plant trees, obviously. But I don't know about you, but I have a real issue. Not I personally have a real issue, but we have an issue with rabbits and hares as well. Mostly hares where I am. They cause a lot of damage to some, especially some of the woodlands I've been involved in. Some that are on kind of steeper slopes as well. I've seen, they love a cardboard tree shelter because they like
Mm.
scratching the bottom of them to get at the tree, and
Hmm.
also put their paws on the top as well to have a good nibble. And they do like a cable tie as well, Katie. I don't know if you come across that, but I, I am regularly replacing cable ties on a particular woodland that I manage because the hares just love, and they've got to continuously eat, haven't they, hares and rabbits, obviously to keep that because the teeth keep on growing. Is that a rabbit thing or is it just
Mm.
a hare thing? So yeah, I don't know what
No,
your
I
experience
think
down
it's
there is.
yeah, I think it's the same. Um, yeah, I've seen cable ties being nibbled and eaten, and by deer as well. That they'll eat cable ties and eat the guards themselves. Nothing's safe anymore. Um, but yeah, I mean, so with uh hares and rabbits, hares was the same as voles. Hares and voles will um sort of impact the trees at like the establishment stage. So like when we're um like planting them, trying to get them off. Um, Voles will go for like the seedling stage as well, but hares will also browse on them when they're sort of at that thicket stage, whereas rabbits can have an impact on them throughout the whole thing. So establishment, seedling, thicket, when they're a pole stage tree, and when they're
Yeah.
mature. Um, just because of the slight differences in their ecology. Um, but yes, they are both, again, other species that are quite prominent down here. But I mean, rabbits, I don't know if you've noticed it, they have seemed to have dropped off a bit, not seeing as many. Is that the same as up in the
Um,
Dales, or are
I
they still
pro
quite?
I probably can't comment on the Dales as a national park as a whole, but certainly, yeah, in a couple of sites I work on, there has seemed to have been a little bit of reduction. Whether that was, you know, kind of dry spring or something like that, I'm not sure, but I am thinking of one site that's in my head at the moment, which is like Peter Rabbit and Friends every time you turn up. So I guess it's on I guess it's kind of site by site again.
And interestingly, again, with my notepad of facts, so rabbits, as we know, introduced species. So they were introduced to the mainland. I've got 1235. Ugh, went into I went into a northern accent then. 1235 AD um is yeah, the date that I've got here for them. So they've been here a long time, but again, introduced species. But what I actually didn't know this. So I thought hares were native, but actually our only hare species that is our native hare is the mountain hare. Um, Whereas the brown hare, which is the one that we're talking about predominantly impacting our trees, was again introduced in the Roman times, but they are considered as naturalized now, which is, we do see them as like iconic in, the landscape, don't we? Hares, like they're a British species. That's how we see them. But yeah, I didn't know that was the difference between the two.
No, that's surprising. I know that again across the Dales, there's quite a lot of areas where there would be. I can't remember the exact terminology for it, but it's almost like a rabbit hump, because obviously they were brought into the country for their meat and fur. There is kind of almost like quite a few kind of ancient monuments around, kind of archaeological areas as well, where they would have been housed and things like that. But I guess not many people will think that both rabbits and hares were effectively introduced. But I guess everything's introduced, Katie, at the end of the day, isn't it?
At some point.
At some point, yeah.
At some point, exactly, yeah. And rabbits have, you see them in films and things like that being, they're classed as pests and things, and the farmer goes out and eats rabbit pie and all that sort of stuff. But they've been here a long time, and they've had an impact in certain areas. So what I find really interesting about rabbits is obviously they can have a detrimental effect for us planting, but actually they are quite important for certain habitats, for like rare species of plants. So where is it? It's the Brecklands, I think it is, and it's called a Shifting Sands project, where they were using rabbits to help bring about record numbers of these different rare species.
Oh, okay.
So actually the rabbits are a keystone species basically for that ecosystem. So they're in, they found their niche there. That's where people want them, and that's where they're being useful. But for us in a field where we're trying to establish a woodland, and then they come along and nibble at them, not so much.
Well, and they certainly don't mess about, do they? But I guess again, this we know the balance is out once again, but there's things we can do. I've got a landowner who's basically controlled rabbits for 40 years and has got and anything else, and has got amazing regen. Not everybody wants to go down that way. Fencing with rabbit netting is a. I sounded really northern as well then, that rabbit netting.
I know what's going on with us today.
Yeah, fencing with rabbit netting is an obvious one.
Yeah.
When we look at the use of plastic tree shelters, we don't have to use 1.2s all the time. 0.6s, 0.75s. It is using less plastic.
Yeah.
That'll keep rabbits away. But yeah, there's not an easy solution, is there? Apart from rabbit pies, I guess.
Yeah, no, yeah, and like you say about the fencing, that's the standard down here. So if we do deer fencing, because obviously, as we've established, we have a lot of deer, a lot of fallow deer, so we need proper deer fencing. Then we always tend to put the rabbit fencing at the bottom, just because we have got a lot of hares in areas, and certain areas a lot of rabbits. So it's kind of a standard. But yeah, in terms of that as a form of protection, again, guards as a form of protection, but even fencing, it's still a material that we're putting out there, and we've got to think about what's the end of life of that material. Like that fencing, is it going to sit there forevermore? No, we need to keep it going, repair it, or at some point remove it when the trees are established. You remove it, so then it's an actual woodland. And it's the same with the guards. We need to remove them when they're no longer needed. But again, that's not always done, which is again why we're trying to do this, to try and talk about it and make people aware that we can't be leaving these things out in the environment. But the only other protection, sort of management method is again lethal control, which people tend to do with rabbits and hares in certain areas. So like you say, rabbit pie.
Yeah. That's well, it's not right, but yeah, you are right. I guess what we're asking people to do, Katie, is find out what's on your, if you're doing planting, find out what browsing pressure there is. What could happen, and factor that into a plan. You don't have to go straight away to, if you've got voles on your site, you don't have to put up 8-foot deer fences and 1.5 meter tubes, do you? You have to kind of tailor your protection to what the issue is. Obviously, when you plant trees, you are going to invite other species in, and they will have a really good go at your trees. But I guess it's just thinking ahead, isn't it? And everything that we've mentioned here, it is a management stroke protection issue, isn't it? It's something that needs to be thought about. There isn't one solution that fits everything.
No.
When you you think about, especially you think about up in the Dales, if you increase raptors, you put raptor purchases up, and an increase in tree planting leads to an increase in voles, which then leads to an increase in various raptors. Then you could have an issue with kind of wader protections as well. You could have issues with predation of kind of curlew and things like that. So there isn't everything you do is going to lead to something else, isn't it? I guess is what I'm getting at.
Definitely, yeah. There's not a one size fits all thing, but like everything has consequences. So everything, even if you think you're doing the right thing, we can't always think about what the knock-on effects of that will be. Like you just said, an example there about, okay, you're solving your vole problem, but are you causing another problem for another species? And if we could I'd love to be able to do everything without actually having to manage species. And it's hard, isn't it? Because it's like you're playing a game of chess all the time. It's like, right, we need to plant trees. We need, for all the reasons that we know we need to plant trees, and obviously the targets and things that we have as a country. But there's lots of knock-on effects that come with that, and we have to think about, okay, we're obviously talking about animals and how they can impact our planting, and then all the other things like climate change and all that stuff that impacts it. And if you were to try and solve one problem, 9 times out of 10 you've started another problem, or it's contributed to another one. So you can't always win. You just got to do your best. And yeah, just try different things. And that's why I really like it when we talk about alternative things like putting raptor perches up that might ease off the pressure for voles a little bit, or it's interesting when people talk about introducing species such as the pine marten and stuff like that. It's another way of looking at it. And that's what we're really interested to hear, people's thoughts and their ideas or things that they've tried, because ultimately we don't want to be using plastic, and we don't want to be using putting things out there. But if it's the only thing that we can do short term, then that's obviously what we've been doing. But we're trying to think long term. We're trying to think about how can we do it all to work nicely together. But yeah, it's a really hard problem.
Well, that was a bit of a hefty chat, Katie, and obviously your penchant for rabbit pie came out really strong in that chat. No, I guess in all seriousness, we're not encouraging people to go out and blast rabbits, and it was very much tongue in cheek what we're saying about rabbit pie.
I'll put it out there. I've never had rabbit pie. It's just the point of sometimes that's the way that needs to happen for that particular site. It's either we use plastic, but then using plastic is obviously bad, so we go to other measures of control, but then that's bad. So then you don't plant the trees, but then that's bad because we need to plant the trees. So it's kind of it's a catch-22 situation. I think a lot of people that are in the forestry and tree industry find themselves in.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you mentioned to if you went to a farmer kind of 50 years ago and said, we need to put some trees in this field, but there's a rabbit problem, we all know what that farmer was going to do. So but we're certainly not advocating that, are we, Katie? Even though you suggested it loads of times. You did it, wasn't me. It was you.
Oh, go on, move on to the quiz.
So anyway, yeah, we as regular listeners, we're regular listeners after 5 episodes. We're having it, Katie. We've got regular listeners. As regular listeners will now know, we have a bit of fun towards the back end of the podcast where we have a quiz. So Katie is 2-1 up in the quiz to date, and it is my turn, Katie, if you're in the mood. for which sounds really suggestive. I might edit that out. No, I'm going to leave it in. Yeah, you're 2-1 up. So are you ready for a bit of a quiz, Katie? It's your turn to be put under pressure, I think.
Let's do it. I love a quiz.
Okay, so I have 4 questions in front of me.
Okay.
A couple are true or false, and then the other 2 are you've got to pick the right answer from 3. So I think the way we've done it so far, it's always been 3 questions. So I'm going to get you to pick 1, 2, 3, or 4.
Okay.
And we'll do it that way, I reckon.
Okay. So I've got to pick a number, yeah?
Yeah.
3.
Okay. Number 3. What is the best way to cook a rabbit? No.
No.
Number 3. Okay. So these are all hare related.
Okay.
So young
as in the animal hair, or
yes. Is it hair or hair? I don't know. I need to go more Essex quite clearly. So there's a collective term for a group for young hares.
Okay.
Okay. So are they called either preemies,
right,
leverets,
yeah,
or nurslings?
Leverets. I know that one.
Correct. Yeah, I love the idea of a nursling.
I know, that would be really cute.
So cool. That's got to be a vole, hasn't it? Baby vole's got to be a nursling.
Aww.
I reckon. Okay, so that one was clearly far too easy. So you've got a choice of 1, 2, or 4 now.
4.
4. Okay, this is another kind of pick the one out of the 3, and I'm going to make these a lot harder next time, or I'm going to subcontract quiz questions out to a local quiz team.
Yeah.
So a group of hares. Are you going to know this one? What is a group of hares known as? So are they a drove? A drove of hares? It sounds a bit weird. A pack of hares, or a haggy? A haggle of hares.
Oh, I don't know this one. Oh, I really like the name. I like the word haggle. I'm gonna go for drove.
That is correct.
Oh!
You knew that one. That is one of those, when you ever watch The Chase or something like that, and the contestant's like, oh, well, it could be one, or because they've been told by the producer to really drag it out for suspense. It's like, oh, is it this? I know what it is, but I'm going to spend the next 20 seconds talking about it. Yeah, it is a drove of hares, which I thought sounded a bit odd.
Yeah.
When I was doing. And then I've just got a true or false, but you're 2-0 up anyway, so you can pick 1 or 2, and yeah, 1. Bask in the glory of a 3-1 win.
1.
So I was looking at hare folklore, so you've got to decide whether this is true or is it something I've made up. Okay. So a hare's paw, when carried in the right hand pocket, it's very specific, isn't it? Very specific, was believed to ward off cramp and rheumatism. Do you think that's true, or do you think that's true folklore, or is that folklore that I've made up?
I'm gonna go.
You're doing your chase thing again, aren't you?
No, I genuinely don't know. This might be the wrong answer. I'm gonna go with false because I think it's a rabbit's foot.
No, it's that I didn't make it up, and I couldn't believe it when I read it. Yeah, so apparently a hare's paw. It's true. Yeah. Well, it's not true. It's bunkum, isn't it? Let's be fair. But it's complete bunkum. Let's be fair. But yeah, apparently the folklore was a hare's paw, when carried in the right hand pocket, was believed to ward off cramp and rheumatism. If you do a search online for folklore around hares, there's some really, really weird stuff, not for a family podcast, on there as well. So I'll
check your Google history.
I'll tell you about one of those off air. So yes, Katie, that's apart from the fact that you did the chase thing on me, that you are 3-1 up.
Hey, it feels good to be a winner. Right, so you know what time it is now? Magic hat time.
Ooh.
I didn't do this the last 2 we've done.
No, we had plans, didn't we? Who'd have thought it? Yeah.
And I'm going to record on my phone me pulling it out the hat for them for them doubters out there that thought that I was lying about my hat. I've got my headphones on. So, okay. Oh, before I pull it out, do you want to tell us what subjects we've got left?
Yeah, we have quite a few subjects, and these keep evolving during the weeks, don't they? When we think, oh, that'd be a good one to talk about, and that could be this, and that could be that. So yeah, so there's probably 5 things that we really want to talk about in this series. I'm saying series because I think season's a bit American, really. So yeah, greenwashing and waste hierarchy was one. That'll be riveting. Different types of tree planting. So we're looking at kind of agroforestry, orchards, things like that. And also soil and mycorrhizal networks and impact of plastics on soils. The Forest Plastic Working Group and how that came about, and hopefully we can get somebody from the group on to talk about that. And we want to do a Q&A session, don't we, Katie, which you've mentioned a couple of times on this episode already.
Definitely. Cool. Okay, ready for the rummage?
Yep.
I'm gonna click record. My hand in there. And if you can hear the rummaging, do a good old blah, blah, blah. This one out. Dun, dun, dun. Oh, my terrible handwriting. Greenwashing and waste hierarchy.
Okay, that'll be so that's the next issue.
Yeah.
Next edition on greenwashing and waste hierarchy. So we'll obviously go into more depth when we get to that. But greenwashing, I guess, is the claims made by various manufacturers and other people about the biodegradability of their products, or we all know what greenwashing is, but we'll explain that in more detail. And the waste hierarchy is something that looks at how we need to transform to a circular economy and what we should do with an item, I guess, once it's in the environment. We'll go more into detail about that, Katie, next time.
Yeah, and that'll be a good episode for people who are looking at doing tree planting that don't want to use plastic, but want to know a bit more about all these other types of bioplastics or other materials and things that are out there. So yeah, tune in for that one.
Excellent. So this is the most important part of the episode, when we all sit down around our radios, lean in a little closer and listen to the announcements, Katie, because that's, the parish notice and the announcements is what we're here for. Would we know what to do with ourselves if we hadn't seen it, say it, and sorted it? It's all absolutely vital. And you think about years ago that when there wasn't social media, the only way you'd get an announcement would be to look in the local paper, and then you'd know that if there was ice outside, you had to be careful and walk around and put an extra coat on or a scarf or some mittens. But yeah, so we're delivering a service to the public here. So
I feel like you should have a different voice for it.
All very, very important. So if you could all just lean into your speaker just a little bit, but please don't do that if you're driving. And obviously we are doing this because we absolutely love tree planting, and we're really happy with the feedback we've had so far. The numbers of people listening has kind of stunned me and Katie that you'd actually want to listen to us have a witter on about tree planting. So that is obviously appreciated. If you could get in touch with, I know Katie has made at least 2 calls during this episode, please get in contact with us to ask questions about tree planting or anything involved with kind of trees and woodlands, the use of plastic in woodlands. If you've got any sort of queries and questions, please do get in touch, because we do want to do a nice Q&A session at some point. What else should I mention, Katie? See it. So we've seen it. I've got to say it now, haven't I, before we get on to sorted. Plot that plastic is really important. So head over to the Forest Plastics Working Group website and please plot tree guards and shelters and plastic and things like that across the areas where you go for a walk. It's important that we get a really good picture of what's out there, so we can help target various recycling hubs and things like that, and see it, say it, and sorted. Yeah, so we head over to the Forest Plastics Working Group website. I've uploaded 2 or 3 case studies on there quite recently on various odds and bobs. And yeah, do you think that's enough for announcements, Katie? I know they're not, groundbreaking considering what's happened this week across the world, but I think the members of the public will be quite happy that they are now able to get on with the rest of their days, knowing that there's not ice outside and they don't need to wear the mittens.
I think it was fabulous, Mike. You did a fab job as always. I do feel like we need to put some sort of like news music behind it when you do it, make it extra dramatic. But no, yeah, all grand. And again, we'll put everything in the show notes, links to things we've spoken about, links to the Forest Plastics Working Group website and the Plot That Plastic app. Please download and have a go at that. And we will see you next time.
Will do. Bye.
Yeah, thanks for listening.